Today we're discussing interfaces, but before I talk about interfaces, I'd like to talk about some things I forgot to mention yesterday when I was talking about inheritance. One is the base keyword. If you notice in the derived guy class, that is derived from the base class with a colon here. There's a reference to a variable that's in the base class is derived from, which is base public name. And in order to access this from the derived class, we use the qualifier base dot. And you can do this both with public variables and with protected variables. Here's the public variable up here and a protected variable here. And if we scroll down, I'm doing the same thing in this second method with protected variable and also once again with the base dot qualifier. And the base dot qualifier could be used not just for data but also for method. So it could have base dot base method 01 in a derived method. Other things I wanted to talk about was that in C#, unlike C++, you can inherit from only one base class. So I couldn't have a comma and say base guy 2 and comma some other class that I want to derive from. You can do that in C++. But what you can do is you can have multiple derived classes that derive from this base class. And you can also have multiple classes that derive from this derived class. And the real advantage of having multiple classes that derive from the derived class is you get all the non-private methods and data from the base class, as well as all the non-private methods and data from the derived class and the class that's derived from the derived class. So you could linearly accumulate methods and data. In effect, you can have sort of a faked out way of deriving from multiple classes. I'm going to move on to the main topic, interface. Interface is very closely related to inheritance. But in order to implement an interface, you use the interface keyword. And interfaces, by definition, all the data and methods described in an interface are public. So you don't have to use the public keyword. And if we look at an interface, you see here's the interface keyword. And by convention, all interfaces start with a capital I, which helps distinguish them from base classes. Although it somewhat confuses them with Apple products like the iPhone and the iPad. And here you see we have a by default method, void show message string str mess. And this signature, when you implement an interface, must be identical. So quite often you want to just cut and paste this into the implementation. So above the interface we have implementation of the interface, and like inheritance, it's saying I'm going to implement this interface with a colon. So it says interface implementation colon I show me. And you could have as many interfaces as you want. You could have, iFiles or whatever interfaces you want. There's no limitation on multiple versions, unlike or multiple implementations, unlike base classes, which you can only implement one. And as I said, the signature has to be identical. As you can see, it is here. And then within the body, which there is no body defined in the interface, but in the implementation you have a body that defines the interface as your code defines the interface. And you might say, what's the point? You could just have this declared in here and not have an interface. And essentially the point is to create a standardization across multiple programmers implementing something. Like if it's a file interface, and you always want to have a write and a read with certain parameters and certain return values, you can specify an interface to have everybody implement it that way. So that's basically the main rationale behind an interface. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you learned a lot from it. And don't forget to subscribe.